Olá, leitores, tudo bom? Meu nome é Paula Drummond, eu sou editora aqui da Rocco e hoje eu tô aqui com um convidado muito especial, o David Ebershoff. Ele, pra quem não sabe, é o autor do A Garota Dinamarquesa, do maravilhoso Garota Dinamarquesa, que não é só um filme, então não é só um filme vencedor de Oscar, ele também é um livro maravilhoso, publicado aqui pela Rocco no selo Fábrica 231, e ele conta a história da Lily Elba, que é uma das primeiras mulheres a passar pela cirurgia de confirmação de gênero. Então foi um livro muito importante para a cultura LGBT aqui no Brasil e no mundo, e a gente hoje vai conversar um pouquinho sobre isso. Vou fazer umas perguntas que a gente selecionou aqui na Rocco e também algumas perguntas que vocês mandaram nas nossas redes sociais. Se vocês ainda não seguem a gente vai deixar as informações, todas as nossas redes aqui no box de informação. Vocês podem seguir a gente e interagir com nossos autores no futuro, tá bom? So David, let's start. First of all, welcome to Brazil.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy our country.
Of course.
And what are you thinking of Brazil so far?
Well, I've only been in Rio so far, so I've seen beautiful beaches, beautiful sunshine, really friendly people, and I'm just really happy to be here visiting my publisher and get a chance to meet some Brazilian readers.
Great. And you were here in Brazil for a very special reason, right?
Yes.
Could you tell our readers a little bit more of what you were doing here?
Well, a couple years ago, I received an email from a student here in Brazil named Fabrizio Pupo, and he told me that he had read The Danish Girl and that the book meant a lot to him, and that he was working on a research paper inspired by the book and the life of Lily Elba. And I wrote him back and said, good luck with your paper, and thank you so much. And then he wrote me back several weeks later and said I got a very good grade on my paper, and he sent me a chart that mapped the emotional journeys of the characters in the book, and it was really thoughtful, and he had spent a lot of time. So I commented on that, and then I concluded in an email. I said, what year are you? Because I assumed he was a university student, and it was then that he told me he was 12 years old. And so yeah. I thought, oh my gosh, this is a really remarkable young person. And since then, Fabrizio has been out doing research on Lily Elba and the book and LGBTQ rights, and he invited me to come to Brazil to speak at a conference in Campo Grande.
Fabrizio is so lovely. I've watched some videos of him, and it's great.
He's really a special person.
Yeah, he's a beautiful human being.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
And about The Danish Girl, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, it started a long time ago. I was reading another book about gender and theory. It was an academic book. And buried in this book was a very brief mention of Lily Elba. And it said she was one of the first people to have gender confirmation surgery, and that she transitioned in the 1920s and 1930s. And I just stopped. I thought, wait a minute, how is it? I had just had a ton of questions. I thought, who is she? How is it that she did something so brave and courageous almost 100 years ago? And also, how is it that we don't know her story? How is it that we don't know who she is today? And so I wanted to begin to answer those questions, and so I started working on the book, and I went to Denmark and started to write what became The Danish Girl.
Oh, amazing. And you said before that you've done an enormous research of Lily's life to write The Danish Girl.
Yeah.
And I'd like if you could please tell us a little bit more about the process of writing it, because I think you went to 5 libraries and you had a lot of information in your hands. And for an example, why did you decide to write a historical fiction and not a biography?
Well, that's a really good question, and her life is really an important life in LGBTQ history. And she continues to inspire many people today, even more people today than ever before. So sometimes I am asked that question, why not write a biography? And the reason is, there are parts of her life that we know, and then there are important parts of her life that we don't know. So for example, she, for a long time, once she realized who she really was, she sought medical help. She went to doctors in Paris, first in Copenhagen and then in Paris. And the doctors told her she was insane. One wanted to lock her up in a mental institution. One wanted to lobotomize her. And she struggled to find doctors who could help her. She ultimately found a doctor in Germany, in Dresden, at the Dresden Municipal Women's Clinic. And it was there that she had her surgeries. And these were groundbreaking surgeries that were very, very important to her, and also an important advancement in medicine. However, so her time at the clinic was really important, the doctor there, and what she went through both physically and emotionally was really important. But that clinic was destroyed in World War II, and many of her medical records were destroyed, and a lot of the information about what she experienced while she was there is not known. We know some of her medical stories, of her medical information, but not all. Right, and when I read a book, the books that I love, I like to get inside the character. And I felt when I was working on this, there wasn't that information to get inside of who she was and what she experienced. And so I figured that historical fiction is a way to do that. And what I wanted to do in The Danish Girl was to represent her emotional experience as much as anything. And that the emotional journey that she goes on is one that is authentic to who she was. That was my goal. And whether or not I achieved that is up to other people to say.
I think you did. I think you did.
Okay,
It's an amazing book. I just recently reread it.
Oh, thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
I'm going to read a question sent by two of our readers, Rebecca Reese and Weasley I think. And what was the biggest challenge to write legal history in such a gentle and delicate way?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Rebecca. I love how you say that. I knew that her life was one of beauty, both because she realized who she was, and that's a very beautiful thing for a person to achieve. But there's another element of this, another element of beauty, and that is that she was an artist, and her wife, Gerda, was an artist, and art and beauty were very important to the way they lived, and creating beauty was very important. So when I set out to write it, I said to myself, I have to try to figure out a way of rendering beauty into the story without it becoming heavy and overdone or purple or too much. So I was thinking, like, I wanted to somehow almost make it feel like a painting, because Gerda, her wife, would paint her, and these paintings of Lily, which exist, if you Google them, you can find them, are very important to her story and important to the Danish girl in the book. And so I thought, I'm going to try to make the book feel like a painting in some ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And so maybe that led to the delicacy that Rebecca is asking about. It was a way of sort of, one of the lenses that I used when writing the book is that art and beauty is very important to this story.
And The Danish Girl tells the story of one of the first transgender women to make the gender confirmation surgery. And it was very important for LGBTQ culture. And in 2017, the New York Times named The Danish Girl one of the 25 books that have shaped the LGBTQ literature over the past 20 years. I know that sexuality and identity are topics that you like to explore in your books, but I'd like to know if you had that in mind while writing The Danish Girl. Like, did you think at the time that the book would bring that much representativeness?
You know, it's an interesting dilemma as a writer or any kind of artist, is that you want to I want to tell a story that can represent something and represent some people's experiences, and I'm mindful of that, and I understand there's a responsibility to that. However, to make a good story and a good book or a good piece of art, a writer has to kind of break away from responsibility and tell the truth. And so what I said to myself is, I cannot represent every transgender person's experience in this book. That's impossible to do. What I want to do is try my best to represent Lily's experience. And if Lily's experience can represent other people's experiences, then maybe the book can do that. But once if I start thinking I'm trying to represent a generic experience, then the story becomes empty and false and didactic. And so I just kept thinking about her, and maybe her story can speak to other people.
Our reader, I am.quino, I think I'm right. I am.quino.
Quino?
Quino, yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. Do you, send that question, do you identify with Lily? In what sense?
Oh, do I identify with Lily?
Yeah.
And in what sense? Yes, I do, very much so, because she said to herself, one day, it didn't happen in one day, but she came to a point in her life when she looked in the mirror and said, I know who I am, and I want the world to see me as I see myself. And she set out on a path to do that. And that was, in my opinion, a very brave thing to do 100 years ago. It's a very brave thing to do today. It's not easy for most people, most trans people today. So 100 years ago. So for me, what I identify with is this idea of saying, this is who I am. And maybe the world sees me differently, but this is who I'm going to be. And as a gay man, I went through that growing up in the 1980s, where I didn't really see very many people like myself, or people that I could identify with in media, or I didn't know any gay people as a gay kid, yet I knew who I was, and so I had to say, this is who I am and this is who I'm going to be, and I don't exactly know what that path will be, but I'm going down that path. And so her courage and her sense of self is something that I really respond to, and I think when I discovered her story, or when I encountered her story all those years ago, that was what spoke to me. Just this being yourself and defying what the world tells you you're supposed to be. I think most of us go through a version of that. I think what Lily went through is particularly challenging, but part of growing up and becoming an adult in yourself is knowing yourself and then saying to the world, this is who I am and this is who I want to be.
Amazing. The Danish Girl was adapted into an amazing, beautiful movie in 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how is it to see your book on the screen, especially with that many awards and nominations with Alicia and Eddie?
Well, it was, I mean, in one world it was amazing, and one word, and super exciting, and I felt incredibly honored. But everything in life is like, there's more to say, and what I want to say about the movie is I never imagined, when I first went to Denmark to work on the story, I never imagined something like that would happen. And when I first went to Denmark, I went to a place called the Royal Academy of Arts, which is an art school in Copenhagen. And this is where Lily, when she still presented as Einar Wegener, studied art, and where Gerda studied art. This is where they met, fell in love, became artists, and it's where their story began. And when I started working on the book, 20 years ago, I went to the Royal Academy of Arts to be where they had been and to research their lives there. And then in 2015, I went back to Copenhagen and I went back to the Royal Academy of Arts, and I was there because they were filming there, and I was there with Eddie and Alicia and our great screenwriter Lucinda Coxon and our producer Gail Mutrix and the whole team, and Tom Hooper, our director. And what I saw on the film set was everybody making that film, Eddie especially, because he was playing Lily, everybody was doing their best to tell her story, and everybody was in awe of her and what her life means. And it meant so much to me to see, to go from, this was where they had been art students, and then this is where I had been as a young writer trying to write my first book, and then to be back there with all these great filmmakers and actors and see them trying to render the story into something special. That was more than I could ever imagine for my life.
This was very special.
Yeah.
Our reader Murilo asked, what does the story mean to your life?
Thank you for the question. The story means to my life is that any one of us can be anyone we want to be. As long as we believe that, and as long as it's truthful to who we really are, we really can transform ourselves to become that person we were meant to be.
Great. And last but not least, can we expect new projects soon? Are you working on something you can share?
Yes, I'm finishing a new book. It's coming out, well, I have to finish it this summer for my publisher in New York.
Just editors.
Editors. I have a good one. I have a really great editor, and I'm finishing that for her, so in probably maybe a little more than a year. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep you posted.
Thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you, David, for this interview. I'm sure our readers are going to love them. Thank you for your visit, for your time, for your kindness.
Thank you.
And if you want to leave a message for Brazilian fans,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for watching. Paula, thank you for interviewing me, and most of all, for those of you who've read The Danish Girl, thank you for reading it, and for those of you who look up to Lily, I share your admiration. Obrigado.
Okay, I think that's it.